A large group of about 20 individuals had been seen getting into the cargo area of a U-Haul truck.
The New York Post had actually reported that police were looking into some particular white nationalist with interest in the Idaho 4 murders. And I don't really see where that makes much sense. Why the hell would Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie be targeted by white nationalists? I'm not really sure that makes sense. And most of them seem to be predominantly white, not that that matters. But I don't know, it's very odd. I honestly just don't even understand. I don't even understand why that would have fit or why that would make sense or why they would have even went there in the first place. And I'm actually very interested in it. And it also seems to align with some of the dates for the search warrants, some of the dates that some of them actually got in town, and some of the dates that an alleged security incident happened, and some of the dates that allegedly Patriot Front were seen committing crimes on a North Idaho campus.
A 911 call came in from a concerned citizen saying a large group of about 20 individuals had been seen getting into the cargo area of a U-Haul truck in the parking lot of the Spring Hill Suites, believed to be communicating with another man in a red Camry using a two-way radio. Police say it further indicated an organized and pre-planned event. 31 men were detained on the side of the road. Police also say in the back of the U-Haul they found metal shields, flags on abnormally long metal poles, and at least one smoke grenade. Many of the suspects were wearing face masks, shin guards, and other protective gear. And officers say it was similar in nature to law enforcement riot control equipment, indicating, quote, an intent to use violence or the threat of violence to disturb the public peace. One man, identified as Thomas Rousseau, the leader and founder of Patriot Front, was also carrying documents outlining call locations, primary checkpoints, and drill times, as well as GPS coordinates for a drop point with 2 backup plans. These new documents reveal there were references to using smoke at the discretion of a column coordinator and an exit strategy once a confrontational dynamic had been established. Investigators state this recovered operational plan further indicated the confrontational intentions of the group to antagonize and cause disorder. In all, 31 men from 13 different states were arrested and 2 other vehicles impounded. When questioning one man from Birmingham, Alabama, he reportedly told police, "We go where we're needed."
They wanted to bust up the gay pride event. Now, Patriot Front, for those not in the loop, is a group that's been pushing white nationalistic vibes hard since the infamous rally in Charlottesville back in 2017.
Immediate area, or you will be arrested.
Graphic images like this showing 20-year-old DeAndre Harris being beaten with sticks going viral.
We were walking down, they bum rushed us, and they just beat me with the poles.
Just before noon, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe declares a state of emergency. Then, that terrible moment. When the driver of this gray Dodge mows down a group of marchers who were protesting the rally. He rams into one group, then puts his car in reverse and accelerates, running over several more before fleeing the scene.
The car just plowed through hundreds of people downtown Charlottesville.
Hit like 2 or 3 other cars and pinned people in between the cars, smashed into people.
The driver is identified as 20-year-old James Alex Field from Maumee, Ohio. Just before the attack, Fields was caught by our ABC cameras chanting a message of white power. 19 people were injured. 32-year-old Heather Heyer was killed. Heather's mother told us her daughter was there protesting white supremacy.
But when it comes down to laying down the law, the case against Rousseau got tossed out by the judge, John Cafferty. Why, you ask? Well, it boils down to a whole mess of delays, missing evidence, and some serious missteps by the prosecutors. While most of Rousseau's followers faced some sort of consequences, Rousseau himself walked free, highlighting just how tough it can be to pin down these extremist types in court. The case against Rousseau, the leader, represented a significant episode in the system's struggle against white nationalist extremism. Despite the group's overt actions aimed at disrupting a gay pride event in Coeur d'Alene, procedural errors, evidentiary issues, and judicial decisions led to the dismissal of all charges against Rousseau.
Detailing the known presence of Patriot Front in the community at least a year ago. Patriot Front is a group with white nationalism ties.
Today, a nonprofit by the name of Property of the People released detail the hate group's presence in the city and on the North Idaho College campus last year. Now, the first report mentioning the hate group dates back to May 2021. According to public records, NIC staff started noticing stickers and vandalism referencing the hate group on campus, and they reported it to police. Now, reports of these stickers continue to come in throughout the summer months. One email from a city maintenance worker even says he removed 15 stickers from McEwen Park. Now, this tells us the city and Coeur d'Alene Police Department were at least aware of the group trying to establish a presence in Coeur d'Alene last year. But the records show no indication that police knew about the group's plans to riot on June 11th during the Pride celebration event. That said, the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations claims there's been an increase in hate group discussions and presence online in the last 2 years. Tony Stewart with the task force says they didn't know about the plans of the 31 men who ended up being arrested from the back of a U-Haul, but they knew something was brewing. The task force recently held a meeting with local leaders who were asking to rally the community against hate groups, something similar to what the task force did in the late 90s when the Aryan Nation marched through town.
Richard Butler was an aerospace engineer who retired in the mid-70s and moved to North Idaho with his wife Betty. They bought some property and later changed the mortgage and the deed to Church of Jesus Christ Christian, tried to make their land, their property, a nonprofit church. And that was basically the birth of the Aryan Nations. And by 1981, they burned the first cross there on the property and started holding annual Aryan World Congresses.
Richard Butler was not a person that was dynamic, and he was not a great speaker, but he was quite effective at publicity. And so he was able to get a lot of publicity, not only with national media, but even at times international media. And so they would come, and he would do 2 things a year that would draw media. Oftentimes in April, he would have a racist skinhead youth conference. And then in July, he'd have his so-called World Congress of the Aryan Nations. And he would draw about 300 in the mid-'80s of that each year. They'd come from Canada and all over the United States.
Butler believed in what he called the territorial imperative, that white people should flock to the Northwest and that they should leave the Southwest to Hispanic folks and the Southeast to black people, and I guess the Northeast to Jews. He had this idea that somehow the country, the United States, could be somehow parceled up into different regions where different races and ideologies could live with their like-minded individuals and people with the same color skin and the same belief system. And initially there was a lot of disgust, but there was also a lot of people just didn't want to register an opinion. As long as they don't bother me, I'm not going to bother them. And so they sort of wanted to look the other way, and it's like, well, they're not affecting my lifestyle or my family, so let them do what they want up on their hillside.
The Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations came out of an incident that took place in Heightening, Idaho in December 1980. And it was an incident in which a Jewish restaurant owner was targeted by what was then the Aryan nations. In the first week of February 1981, we met at the First Christian Church and created what has become known as the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, which will next February be 33 years old.
A lot of individuals from throughout the country would, for example, get out of prison, they would hear about Butler, and they would come to Butler's compound from places like Arizona or Texas or wherever, and would live for a short period of time in a bunkhouse that he had there. And he also had an office and a printing press. They would print leaflets. And one of the first things that we saw a lot of were leafleting of neighborhoods in Coeur d'Alene and in Spokane, and they'd print these racist leaflets. Sometimes they would just drop them on the doorsteps, put them under windshields, and people would wonder who's doing this? Why are they distributing this racist literature? And a lot of it would come back to the Aryan nations.
But anti-fascists are also showing some concern with the FBI just sitting on their hands, as he said. That's his way of saying the FBI ain't doing shit. Drop the ball. But the broader issue may be the law enforcement hierarchy in Idaho, and where the capabilities of these resources and local prosecutorial teams are dwarfed by the scale and complexity of national extremism.
The Idaho Senate has approved a bill defining domestic terrorism as activities done in cooperation with foreign groups. The Idaho Capital Sun reporting Senate Bill 1220 Poverty Law Center says in 2022 it tracked 21 hate and anti-government groups in Idaho. Opponents say the main concern is associating domestic terrorists with a foreign entity.
Governor Brad Little is sending state police to the Texas-Mexico border to, quote, assist with securing our nation's border. Governor Little issued a proclamation today naming January Idaho Stands with Texas in Securing the Nation's Border Month. Idaho will send 2 teams of Idaho State Police troopers down south. Little says they will, quote, learn the best tactics to respond to those who smuggle and abuse vulnerable people.
There's this place in Texas, okay, that's a very popular migrant position, and it's called Shelby Park, and it has turned into something straight out of a movie scene. This park, where folks used to kick back and play some golf and enjoy some outdoors, is now occupied by state forces attempting to prevent U.S. border agents access. They want to keep the feds off of state property and keep the feds from enforcing the United States immigration laws. This means incarcerating those who break immigration law and allowing those who are simply needing help the opportunity for asylum, or at least to apply for such. Operation Lone Star initiative to deter illegal crossing and asylum-seeking migrants by employing extensive physical barriers and law enforcement personnel, including Texas National Guard members and state troopers. Some even deployed from states like Florida, and guess what? What? What do you mean you don't know? Yeah, you do. It's Idaho.
The body is discovered along buoys installed by Texas authorities in the Rio Grande.
Overnight, 2 people found dead in the southern part of the Rio Grande River. One of the bodies found stuck in the barriers installed last month by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. While authorities are still investigating, they say the cause of death and nationality of the victims is unknown. The Department of Justice is now suing the state of Texas and Governor Abbott, claiming the red buoys, tethered to the bottom of the river with heavy cable wire, violate several international treaties and Mexico's sovereignty.
The state's National Guard blocking U.S. Border Patrol agents from a crucial boating ramp in Eagle Pass. We know 3 migrants drowned in the Rio Grande after help could not reach them in time. Now, the federal government taking the fight to the Supreme Court right now.
New barriers now are blocking Border Patrol agents from getting into the park and accessing a boat ramp they need to reach the Rio Grande River. Today, Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar tweeting that 3 migrants, a female adult and 2 children, drowned in the Rio Grande after Border Patrol personnel were denied access to the park to render aid.
Quote, the only thing we're not doing is we're not shooting people who come across the border because, of course, the Biden administration would charge us with murder, he said, as though he shouldn't be charged with murder for that. What the?
When I said, hey, I'm going to grad school in Idaho, everybody's like, are you sure? Like, what part of Idaho? I'm like, Moscow. Are you sure?
That's graduate student Katie Turner, a Louisiana native. A social media post saying she doesn't feel safe as a Black woman in Moscow went viral last year. Idaho's ban on public schools teaching critical race theory, which examines racism as a systemic problem, has further strained Turner's sense of belonging here. People like Doug Wilson also complicate how marginalized groups feel about Moscow.
If you read through slave narratives, you're going to get accounts that are blood-chillingly horrific. You will also get accounts of former slaves who loved their masters.
The conservative pastor is thriving in Moscow with churches, a classical Christian school, a liberal arts college, and a publishing house.
House Bill 377, an act relating to dignity and non-discrimination in public education.
House Bill number 377
passed overwhelmingly.
So we transmitted to the Senate.
And made the teachings of tenets, often found in critical race theory, illegal in Idaho.
Critical race theory demonizes white kids for being white. It teaches that whiteness is a privilege and something students should feel guilty about and apologize for.
University of Idaho law professor says she was discriminated against because of her gender and race, and then faced retaliation after she reported her concerns. The Idaho Statesman says that Shakira Sanders filed a lawsuit in federal court on Wednesday against the University of Idaho, its law school, and a former dean. Sanders says that former dean Mark Adams started a pattern of disparate terms and conditions of her employment when she was hired as dean back in 2014. The lawsuit outlines the discrepancies between the treatment of Sanders and white male professors. The University of Idaho has declined to comment on the lawsuit.
Idaho's abortion ban can now go into full effect. The court overturned a pause on a part of the abortion ban. The U.S. Justice Department says Idaho law violated the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. also known as EMTALA.
President Biden specifically mentioned the new policy at the University of Idaho, which forbids employees from talking about abortion or talking about reproductive rights, warning them in an email they could face a felony for promoting it under Idaho's new laws. This is what the president said when talking about U of I.
Folks, what century are we in? I mean, what are we doing? I respect everyone's view on this, personal decisions they make, but my Lord, we're talking about contraception here. It shouldn't be that controversial. I've asked Education Secretary Cardona to look at the steps that we can take to protect college students and school employees in Idaho or other states where their access to contraception is at risk.
President Biden signed 2 executive orders that take a number of actions to help a woman access reproductive health care, as well as fight that battle in court.
And I saw the baby on the screen, I knew something was wrong.
12 weeks into Jen Adkins' pregnancy, she and her husband John got devastating news. Their baby had Turner syndrome, a chromosomal disorder. The longer the pregnancy continued, Jen's doctors told her, the higher the risk she had for developing life-threatening high blood pressure.
I wanted to be pregnant. I wanted to have this baby, but she wasn't going to live, and my health was at risk too.
Jen and John are Idahoans through and through. John's family goes back 6 generations.
He said, well, because you're in the state of Idaho, we cannot provide a termination for you. We cannot provide an abortion.
In 2020, lawmakers here in Idaho passed a trigger ban, which would essentially ban abortion in almost all circumstances if Roe v. Wade got overturned. Of course, that happened in June of 2022, so the abortion ban went into effect. Now it's illegal in Idaho to get an abortion in almost all circumstances. One of the few exceptions is to save the life of the person who's pregnant. There's no exception for a circumstance like Jen's, where her health was at risk, but her life was not immediately threatened.
Much like the last few years, there have been a series of bills brought forth this year having to do with the LGBTQ+ community.
I have people, friends in this community who have traveled to Mexico, and they say, people here were from Moscow, and immediately they want to talk about this case.